What's up, you guys? Sean Ross at Fightful.com here with the one and only Killer Kross, who's had some interesting things going on in future stars of wrestling. Killer Kross, how you doing?
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to talk about this show. This is right in Fightful's wheelhouse, the MMA pro wrestling crossover. I actually spoke to you a little bit about that in Las Vegas, about your background and catch wrestling and a lot of stuff like that. But this show in particular, Future Stars of Wrestling, really tends to lean in heavily with this MMA crossover. How are you liking that? As I know that that's something you have an interest in.
Well, this is what it has to be. I mean, I've been saying for 5 years this city needs this genre of pro wrestling. And I understand that pancrase hybrid pro wrestling is a subculture community, but, you know, there's a consumer for everything, as a lot of businesses say. And there's very few of us who can do this, and we don't have a platform or a canvas to kind of paint this picture for people. So I've been working very diligently to try to launch this in Vegas, and thanks to Bloodsport, it's really opened the eyes of people here in the United States that this even exists. A lot of people didn't know it was out there, and I am doing my best to collect the proper and appropriate people to bring more attention and awareness to it here in Las Vegas, which, you know, what better city to do it than the fight capital of the world.
So one of the names that's jumped out to me, that might not jump out to wrestling fans, but I'm very familiar with her, Gina Mazzani. We've interviewed her a couple times. She's fought in the UFC. Is she going to be competing? Is she going to be appearing? How will that work out?
That will be announced soon, and
Okay.
I just don't want to give away any spoils, but she will be a part of the show 100%.
And I know Dave Mazzani is there as well. That's really interesting. And we've seen so many of these people that come from UFC backgrounds or MMA backgrounds in general that just translate really well. Some of them don't have traditional, or what would be considered traditional pro wrestling training. I know that term is it's subjective to someone what they take as pro wrestling training. But is there anybody that you've met in your travels, so to speak, here that kind of blew you away with how quickly they've taken to all this?
In terms of what type of pro wrestling? Just pro wrestling in general, like fighters transitioning to pro wrestling?
Yeah, and maybe the showmanship involved with that, because, I mean, nobody would have accused Matt Riddle of being a future pro wrestling star 5 years ago, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I that was the first person that came to mind was Matt Riddle. He's always loved professional wrestling, and he was an excellent mixed martial artist. And, you know, he's been able to put his passions together and look where he is now. I mean, I to be honest with you, he's the best example I could probably use as a guy who's been able to put it all together from both worlds and take it to, you know, the biggest platform in the world.
To the contrary, a lot of people thought that the likes of Tito Ortiz and King Mo and Rampage Jackson would be naturals, and they tried, and it wasn't quite for them. But then you've got guys like Stephan Bonner and Frank Mir who really make it seamless and natural, and they're appearing on this show. When you spoke to them about this, or you made this happen, I know you had a face-to-face with Frank Mir. How do you feel having a former UFC heavyweight champion, a UFC Hall of Famer in Stephan Bonner, stepping over into something that you're helping create?
I think it's great, and I think they're going to have a very good time, and I think their fan base is really going to enjoy seeing them shine in a different type of performance art.
Who else on this show are you particularly interested in seeing maybe even step up their bookings after this?
Simon Gotch, to be honest with you, I know he's not from the immediate professional, you know, fighting circuits and mixed martial arts, but he doesn't like to brag and he doesn't like to put himself over. But Simon Gotch is a very good grappler, and although he's an excellent professional wrestler, he does have a legitimate background. And if you just pay attention to his footwork and the way he's releasing people out of his hips and the way he's throwing certain things, you can tell that he's doing a little bit more than just recreational training. I think he really takes a lot of pride and passion in his work, and at least for the educated eye like myself and others watching, I appreciate it.
A lot of times people will ask me, like, what's one of the best matches I've seen that weren't on TV, and him against Chad Gable. I get to watch them do some chain wrestling in Columbus. It was phenomenal. Like, you could tell that they just went in there and they were like, let's see how this ends up. It was really, really fun to watch. You also have Austin Aries showing up here as a bit of a personality. I mean, you all worked together. You all were around each other a bit in Impact. How's that relationship like? I know it was a little bit contentious with Frank Mir hopping in the ring, going face to face with you.
Well, Austin is doing what he always does. He stirs the pot, and when he feels like his position may be in jeopardy, he begins to collect frontline guys to do his dirty work. And that's, in my opinion, what I think he's done with Frank. But I will warn you that Frank is probably one of the smartest people in sports combat. And he's probably one of the smartest people I've ever actually met. So, I don't know. I mean, don't count your chickens before they hatch, but I wouldn't be surprised to see one day Austin overstepping his boundaries at Frank, and Frank probably breaking him in half.
Yeah, and obviously Frank had a long and storied history with one Brock Lesnar, who has definitely made that transition pretty natural back and forth for himself. Do you think Frank ever eyes that like a potential pro wrestling matchup with Brock Lesnar?
Absolutely. I mean, they never did a third fight. They're 1-1. A lot of people wanted to see number 3, but for reasons unknown to my knowledge, it never happened. And I mean, I think it would be cool to let him go in a professional wrestling ring. Who knows what could happen there? That's a match that a lot of people would pay to watch and see. That's money. It has it printed all over it.
When I spoke to you in Vegas, I spoke to you briefly about Phil Baroni and him calling you out, and sort of the love-hate there that you all have, as you said that you like him, you respect him. He wants you in the ring. Is there any chance that ever happens? And is there a chance that it'll happen here at one of these shows?
I'll compete against anyone in a professional wrestling ring. So he doesn't understand. He's calling me out. I'm not the booker. I'm not a promoter. If someone sees money in it, and someone sees that that's the sort of type of thing that will sell tickets, and they'll book it. He knows that, and I know that too. So he's just doing, I guess, what he thinks is his absolute best to sell the idea and the concept. And if people want to see it, there'll be a demand for it. If they don't want to see it and they'd rather see something else, we'll hear about it. And that's all I can say about it. That's the truth of the matter. He's talking to the wrong people. He needs to get in touch with people that are running the shows and, I don't know, pitch the idea. Of course I'm down. Of course, like, without a doubt.
So based on what is readily available online, it appears you started to train, or not train, but you kind of made your pro wrestling debut towards your late 20s. Would that be correct?
Yes.
So that, if, to some, is considered late. What was a life of Killer Kross like ahead of that? Because, I mean, when speaking to Phil Baroni, he mentioned your dad was into shoot fighting.
Yeah. I've always wanted to be a part of pro wrestling. I've always wanted to be a professional wrestler, but I came up in a family of armed service. And, one side was military, the other side was Army. And we were all blue-collar people. And I've just been very fortunate to be good at what I choose to do, whatever occupation that is. And I, was financially secure and stable in my endeavors. But as you grow up and you become a man, you realize that, money being available doesn't necessarily always equal fulfillment. And this is something I always wanted to do. And I didn't really have sort of a internal network that supported getting involved with professional wrestling, because these guys were, like, I had killers in my family, like, literally. So they were like, well, if you can beat the daylights out of people for real and you can do all this stuff, like, why would you go and get involved with something that's not real? And they just didn't understand, like, professional wrestling is a beautiful art. If you're good at this and you're over, you can go out there and you can engage people and elicit an emotional response and maestro a building or people at home. It's the ultimate art of storytelling. It had nothing to do with a competition setting. And my family was very rooted in that. And it was very difficult for me to kind of, gamble on myself and say, I know in my heart I can do this, but it doesn't matter if I know it, no one else does. So I went out there one day and I tried my hand at it. And the first week I started training, I was already performing in the ring, and it was the best decision that I had ever made. And, prior to pro wrestling and, my quote unquote late arrival I was always involved with executive protection work, bouncing, bodyguarding. I was a bodyguard for celebrities, just all kinds of stuff. I mean, I had every job in the world. I tried literally every job I possibly could to make myself forget about pro wrestling. This was something that was on my mind 24/7 since I was a kid. Like, the very first memory I even ever had was Warrior pinning Hogan. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been pre-programmed since I was a small child. I tried everything to stop thinking about pro wrestling, and I absolutely couldn't. And it just got to a point where I was like, if I go to my grave never trying this, I'm going to be very, very, very disappointed. And, it all worked out. It's just funny. It's, deep down where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. And if you try to deny yourself that, you're never going to be spiritually fulfilled.
You mentioned your first vision or memory of pro wrestling being Warrior pinning Hogan. I'm curious to where you picked up the influence along the line for the style that you carry on now, because, I mean, you do a lot of different things, but particularly that shoot style that you are like, I mean, a lot of people talked about you stealing WrestleMania weekend with Davey Boy Smith Jr. Where did that develop? Because I get the feeling it probably wasn't from Hogan and Warrior.
No. The Hogan and Warrior thing was that storytelling and spectacle that really was so magnetic to me. But in terms of that shoot style, I mean, I grew up doing catch wrestling and jiu-jitsu and boxing. And, I grew up during the time when Jean-Claude Van Damme ruled the movie screen. Everyone wanted to kick like Van Damme, and no one was kicking like that in my family. They were like, listen, you want to go learn to kick like that, then you're going to have to go out there and find somebody else to do it. And I got involved with Kyokushinkai, which led me to Muay Thai, freestyle kickboxing, and then finally over to a gentleman by the name of Mauricio Veio, who was part of the old guard of Chute Box in Brazil. He had left Brazil and moved to Canada while I was living there and was teaching, and then eventually opened up a school called Evolução in Toronto. And I studied under him for a while, and he was teaching, I mean, basically freestyle Vale Tudo, which led me to moving to Las Vegas and pursuing other things. But I've always been involved with combat sports since I was a kid. Like, I was a kid who grew up, I'll give you an example. I would go to bed at night when I was 4 or 5 years old, and it'd be like December. And, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, my father would carry me out of the bed into the car, and he would have to be to the gymnasium at least by 6 a.m. So I wouldn't even wake up through the car, through the cold. I would wake up to hearing people getting knocked out, or people hitting a heavy bag, or people wrestling in a collegiate mat. And my father was always training fighters, always involved with either Olympic wrestling or Western boxing. I mean, I grew up around combat sports. I can't preface it enough. So being involved with that, I just have a lot of natural behavioral patterns and movements and navigational patterns. I'm just attracted to it. And when I began watching pro wrestling, I watched everything that everyone watched in the United States. But when I one day got Fight Network, it was part of some cable package, I discovered UWFI. And oh my God, I was like, this is I got that feeling when I was a young kid watching Taz, when I started to pick up on what pro wrestling was, and it was a work and stuff. Even as a kid, I would watch Taz and I go, okay, maybe this stuff has worked, but Taz is for real. I had a different perception of, the delivery and the presentation of amateur wrestling and judo and grappling and, freestyle kickboxing in pro wrestling. It just looks more real. And unfortunately, it is a little bit more of an abusive style, but you're not going to dish it if you can't take it. So I'm not complaining. And I think that there is a market for it. And I think that with the direction that pro wrestling is moving into, which if you wanted to label it, you could say a hybrid of lucha libre. I think that there is, a void for this style. And because I've been involved with it since I was a little kid, I think I owe it to the pro wrestling demographic and community to make sure it stays alive.
Do you find that to be a more rewarding style despite it being a more physically demanding style because of the things that you mentioned?
Well, to be frank with you, I'm not making a living off pro wrestling. I'm doing my best and I'm paying my dues and I'm enjoying the experience. I'm not complaining whatsoever by any stretch of the imagination, but rewarding monetarily, no. But again, I didn't pursue pro wrestling for the money. You know what I mean? I make that very clear. I don't have some sort of like, how would you say, entitlement, the false sense of entitlement to be rewarded by what I'm putting in. I will be rewarded by how fans observe my value. And if I'm working for a place that is not going to support how fans value me, then I'm working in the wrong place. You know what I mean? I'll go somewhere else. So as an artist, as a professional wrestler, is it rewarding? Yes, it is. Very much so. And it's rewarding to me when people watch my stuff and I get feedback, that, they like it, I guess. Whatever feedback they give me, you know what I mean? Like, I heard a lot of things that were really flattering about Harry and I working the WrestleMania weekend, Davey Boy Smith Jr. I mean, like, I never thought I'd have a platform like that. I never thought that I'd be able to get into that setting because UWFI has been gone for a long time. And I thought I was going to be the first one to launch this. And I was really happy when Bloodsport came around. I was like, I don't even care that it wasn't me as the first one to launch this. I'm just so happy that somebody did it because this is amazing. And if we can find the right players to do this, and not a lot of people can, I think that people will really appreciate it. And, as a professional wrestler, I have certain things that I'd like to contribute, back. One of them obviously is to make sure people get their money's worth. And, another is to kind of give something to the industry. And there's a lot of guys, like I said, who can do this that just don't have the place to do it. And if I can create a place for them to do that and I can participate and contribute like that, I'll be really happy when, I can no longer do this one day.
Are there certain people that at least that you can name within the MMA world that you point at and you say, man, I'd love to get them and see them on a show like this, like future stars of pro wrestling?
Cain Velasquez is someone who comes to mind. I think he would be a perfect fit for professional wrestling. I mean, Conor McGregor would be amazing. You want to talk about a guy who can, sell ice to the North Pole. He knows how to draw, and because he's legit as legit can be, he would be perfect. He'd be perfect for a setting, like this, for this type of genre of pro wrestling.
Isn't it amazing when you see guys like Mikel Pereira even doing goddamn lion salts off the cage, and it's like the crossover is so there. Like it's almost amazing that it wasn't picked up on before this, but it's just the marriage is there. It's ready.
No, totally. It totally is. It totally is. There was a weird love-hate relationship with MMA and pro wrestling for a long time, and I still don't understand where the hell that came from. It's like, I mean, if they were looking at each other like they were competing, I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's really silly. People know what they're watching. It's 2019. Yeah. It's like they know what this is. Nothing is more gross to me than someone who is trying to undermine the intelligence of people who are watching what they're doing. Mm-hmm. You don't have to give it away. You don't have to break everything down and explain it to people, but to try to overwork people or insult their intelligence or, undermine their intelligence, it's just, we're way long past that. People hear shoot interviews all the time. Like, the funniest shit to me, pardon my French, but the funniest shit to me is some of these guys that have been around for a long time, that have been in the business 15 to 35, 40 years, they're complaining about, the younger generations. They're giving it away. Like, they're shaking hands at the end of the match. They're going on the internet and saying, thanks for the match, man. Like, they're complaining about that while they have a podcast where they're exposing everything in the business. It's like, what the fuck are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, what exactly are we doing here? You're complaining that the young guys are doing this while you have a weekly podcast where you discuss writing, booking, and angles that used to happen. And like, you're talking about the last 40 years behind the scenes. Isn't it all the same thing? Like I said, man, it's 2019. And
I just watched Paulie Malignaggi and Artem Lobov hug each other after spitting at each other for like 3 months.
Thank you. And that's been always my thing too. It's like, I've never seen that I've been critiqued before by guys way ahead of me that have made millions of dollars, and their opinions are valid to me. 100%. I don't come from an egocentric place about it. I'm not disregarding like they don't know what they're talking about, but I'm just saying, based on the notion that you just brought up, I've been in competition settings since I was a little kid, and I have really strongly disliked people I've competed against, and I've still shaken their hand, and I've gone to dinner with them, and we've gotten drinks before. Like, it's not like that. It's not every occasion is not like that. And, to their defense, not every occasion is a handshake occasion either. But I mean, the art is subjective, is it not?
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about it. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I could talk to you about this stuff all day. This is my jam, talking about the crossover between pro wrestling and MMA. I definitely encourage everybody to check out, especially if you're in the Vegas area, check out Future Stars of Wrestling, July 5th, 2019 at 9 p.m. You all can get tickets at futurestarsofwrestling.com. Kross, thank you so much, man.
Thank you for the platform, and thanks for helping us get this thing off the ground. I sincerely appreciate it.